Hello guys, I'm James and I'm here today to talk to you about Consider Phlebas by Ian M. Banks. It's been a while since we've sat down and talked about books together. I know, January's sort of come and gone. Now it's fucking middle of February. So better do some content. Why not start with a review and a little plot analysis of this book, Consider Phlebas by Ian M. Banks. So this book, what is it about? It is about a guy called Horza Bora Gobachal, or Bora Horza Gobachal. It's one of the many Banks characters that I just can't pronounce their names at all. So it's about this guy. He's hired by this race of aliens called the Adherans to capture a rogue mind, and a mind is like a giant supercomputer which is developed and owned by this other society called the Culture, which is like a hodgepodge anarchist state of space Marxists basically, and they've got all these very liberal views about identity and humanity, and basically anything with sentience can be part of the culture, can be considered a citizen of the culture. And the minds, which these essentially ginormous AI supercomputers, they are like the leader class of the culture, for all it's worth, because the culture don't really believe in leaders, but that's world building, neither here or there. So it's about this guy who is trying to capture a mind which has gone to ground, basically. It's like it got attacked in a big ship, and it escaped the space battle as part of this war between the Culture and the Adherans. And he's tasked to go and get it back and bring it back to the Adherans. Pretty simple setup. It's terrible. The book is, as far as I'm concerned, this book is like a disaster. For more or less the whole thing. I would say a good 80% of this book is just bad, and then there's some good stuff. So let's talk about where it sort of went wrong, what we can learn from it as readers, as potential writers, and why is this book just fell flat on its face. So it starts off pretty strong. It starts off pretty well. Horza is like this guy who is a part of a race called Changers, and they are able to like manipulate their body in certain ways. So they're essentially shapeshifters. They can just take the form of any person that they get to know in a small amount of detail. So they can just completely take your identity, basically, which is why he's pretty useful as like a sleeper agent. So he is tasked by he hates the Culture, basically. So he's working for the Adherans. And it's really here where things start to fall apart. We don't get a lot of backstory for Horza. I would argue that we don't really get any backstory for Horza. We know that he had a girlfriend once. That's about it, really. We don't know a whole lot about him, and we never learn anything about him, really. Like his reasons for hating the Culture are very flimsy. Like he sees the Culture as like this evolutional dead end because they are like they're like a heterogeneous society. They believe in like the purest form of what it is to be completely free. They're essentially ageless. They live in an age where there's no need for material possessions, because like everything that you would need to survive is provided for you in the Culture, and like anything you could ever want is provided for you. It is an actual real fully realized space utopia, and Horza hates it because they have machines, I guess. It's like he doesn't like that machines are allowed to be part of the Culture, and that is really it. Like he's like, you're ruled by your machines, you're an evolutionary dead end because you're not really life. You're it's very contrived, like his reasons for hating the culture, very flimsily explained, and it's just that sort of underlying lack of motivation really just fucking pulls the entire novel down. The pacing of this book is atrocious. Like I've seen people say, like in reviews, like, oh, it's so action packed. It never stops, like moving from scene to scene, and that is true. But the problem is the problem is Act 2, right? So the beginning of the story is pretty good. We establish who Hauser is, what his mission is, and like there's a wrinkle like in the beginning to prevent him from immediately solving the problem. Good. Okay, we're off to a strong start. But then, because Hauser doesn't really have a motivation, like he doesn't really, like he's not an adherent soldier. He's like been hired to do this. He just sort of farts about for like 80%. Like the whole Act 2 is literally just detours and reasons why Hauser isn't going to do his mission, and that's a big problem because and then Act 3, like we get back on track with the mission and we think, oh yeah, that's what he was trying to do. But you could literally carve out probably where do we get to like the conclusion of the story? So we get to about here, where so like about this much at the start is good, and then about this is like all right, and then this whole bit you could just scrap it, to be honest, and it'd be a lot better as a story. So why is that? So basically, Hauser is at the very start of the book. Hauser's detoured from doing his mission, and he gets like swept up with this gang of pirate mercenaries. And there's so many characters that are introduced straight away in this part that it's impossible to keep track of them. None of them are really very distinct. Even the ones that like carry through like all the way to the end of the novel, couldn't tell you anything about them. Couldn't tell you anything about maybe like one plot point about them. There's a woman one, she's religious. There's another woman one who is the love interest. And then there's like an old guy, and that's about it. That's all I can really remember. That everyone else is just, they're nothing. They're nothing characters. They're there to take part in action set pieces, which is what most of Act 2 ends up being. It is so important for character to drive story, in my opinion, because otherwise you end up with something like Consider Phlebas, where you could take Hauser out, just pluck him out of the story, and all of the events of Act 2 essentially to happen in exactly the same way, just without him there. Like he is kind of like a bystander to this group of space pirates that are uninteresting. They're uninteresting characters. They have no real motive goal. Hauser's motive is put on the back burner. And that's the biggest issue. Like, it would be one thing if Hauser kept getting derailed from trying to go to his mission, and he was like actively trying to get back on track. If this was something he really cared about. But basically what happens is Hauser is distracted from doing this, and he thinks, guess we're doing this. He's like, I guess we're doing this now. Okay, well, maybe I'll go. Like, there's even a scene where, like, he sort of thinks for half a paragraph. He's like, I could just run off with these space pirates and just forget the whole war. And he thinks that, and then he just goes, nah, probably should just do it. It's like, what is this guy's arc? he doesn't have a character arc. He doesn't learn anything. He doesn't grow. Like, his opinions on the culture are never challenged by anyone else, and like that's a massive problem with sort of him and really examining his motives. Like, he hates the culture, and he's just like, I hate the culture. They're shit, and no one ever challenges him on that. Like, even characters from the culture never challenge him on that. They just are like, oh, whatever, mate. Like, he's so irrelevant, and I don't know if that's part of the theme of this book, because I get that there are themes of like, the little motions in war. Like, he is a small cog in a really big machine, and ultimately his actions are more or less meaningless in the grand scale of the universe. But that doesn't mean that whilst I'm reading about them, everyone can just act like nothing matters, because it just makes it really tedious, and it's so long. It's 450 pages of story, where about 250 of them are plot relevant. The rest are just world building, and I'll give it this. Okay, so Ian M. Banks, as far as I'm concerned, basically what's happened here is that he's trying to build this science fiction universe, and he wants to take us through different kind of things that will happen in this universe. The problem is, he's created like this whistle-stop tour where Hawser goes from one set piece to another, so that Ian Banks can show off more of his world building that he's created. And all of the world building is really good, but it's just delivered through such a boring lens that it's hard to care about any of it. Like, there are subplots that pop up for a chapter that are never touched on again and have no relevance to anything. There are so many weird things. Like, characters do things just for no reason. Like, it makes no sense. Like, one character, like, his entire character, he just goes completely mental for no reason. But like, the reason is, like, I say it's for no reason, but the reason is because it has to deliver Hawser to the next set piece. And that's not a good way to craft a story. So that's kind of where this has gone wrong, is it doesn't have a strong sense of character, either in the sub-characters or the main cast itself. And as a result of that, you don't have the motivations dragging you through. You don't have that logical underpinning of every action that really creates a story about this character. It's just a story about a man with a gun, and sometimes he does a shooty. That's like everything I hate about books, that especially science fiction books. It's those shooty bang bang the alien kind of books, where everything is just action, and there's no real examination of anything. Like, there are a few chapters where sort of the consequences of war and things are talked about and discussed, but they're treated as interludes, and they're even titled interludes. And that kind of annoyed me. Like, I would prefer a story that was about like the war analyst character that pops up in this book. Like, that is the sort of science fiction I prefer. And what's really frustrating about this is that I know Ian Banks can do better, because I've read his other books, or like some of them anyway. Like, Player of Games is really good, and you'll notice how Player of Games is like this long, and this is fucking huge, and it just goes on forever about almost nothing. And that's it, really. I mean, that's what went wrong with Consider Phlebas. So what we can learn from a reading perspective and from an authorial perspective is that story relies on character. Like, there's this big debate, I know, amongst the BookTube community. I guess it's not really a huge debate, because no BookTuber doesn't have debates. But there's this sort of like, you hear it in tags. Are you a plot-driven story reader, or are you a character-driven story reader? And I would argue that you really can't have a purely plot-driven story and it still be really compelling, because otherwise, like, without the characters driving that story, it could just be anything happening to anyone, and it's just it's like watching a Fast and Furious film. Like, you're just looking at the picture, you're just looking at the words, and you go, all right, that happened. like the plot is there to provide consequence to the character, and the character will try to move the plot in order to make a better outcome from. I'm just rambling now, but you get what I mean. Like, character is so key to a strong story, to a strong plot, that I think you can't separate the two into such distinct categories like that. And I think that's what's happened here, is that we've gone too plot heavy and not enough character. Like, there's no character, and therefore the plot is there, and I guess on a surface level, like, the events sound quite exciting, but none of them really dovetail together properly with a character motivation that really would hold it all together, and that is why it fails for me as a novel. So that's it, my review of Consider Phlebas by Ian M. Banks. It's not good, but fortunately for you, culture fans, if I guess you haven't read this, you're probably not a culture fan, but good news for you if you want to get into this series of books is that all of them essentially are standalone, so you don't have to read this. You can just read start with book 2. It's much, much better. There's a review for that on my channel as well, so go and find that if you are interested in that. The last thing I have to say before I go is that we have already done, and by we I mean myself and Celise from the Book Armada, Celise from the Book Armada, have done our first Witcher read-along live show. That was on Celise's channel, so I'll link it in the description. Please do go and check it out. It's all on video on demand nowadays. You've obviously missed the live bit, but the next live show is coming up on the first Saturday of March, which I believe is the 2nd of March. I think it's the 2nd of March. You'll know. It's the first Saturday in March. It's hard to get past that. Happens at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which currently is 4 p.m. UK time. But I suppose in April that will change because the clocks go forward here. But yes, 4 p.m. UK time. Be there. Don't miss it. It's going to be on my channel this time, so you'll probably get a notification if you've got the bell thing rung. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll be talking about Game of Thrones.